Coming up on today's show.
We don't have the sort of exercising muscles of decision making.
I think we all know people who are indecisive. We could probably pop into our mind.
If I say yes, this could happen. If I say no, this could happen. And sometimes both ends of the decision can have a little fear, which is why somebody might be sitting in indecisiveness.
Deciding to decide today on Keeping You Organized. Hello, welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to make a decision to actually make a decision, and in order to help us make a decision, we're going to bring on Lisa Montanaro, lisamontanaro.com. Lisa, welcome back to Keeping You Organized.
Hello, nice to see you, John, and hello everyone that is watching or listening.
Good. Well, frequently we talk about decision making on this program, and today I want to talk about deciding to decide is like an action step, but when we talk about making decisions, there's kind of a penalty if you don't make decisions. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think there is. And it's interesting because I think the penalty that people are worried about is making the wrong decision, but we want to actually back it up before then, because I think the bigger penalty is not making decisions at all.
Oh, okay.
Being indecisiveness in and of itself is actually not a great task. It's not a great trait, I should say, to have.
Yeah. Well, that can cause problems too, right?
It can, because, for example, it's hard to be a leader. It's hard to be a leader in your life, in your work, in your business, if you are not a good decision maker. And it's not even about being a good decision maker. It's just sort of exercising those decision-making muscles. So let's think about, let's go all the way back. If as a kid growing up, if all decisions were made for you, if you had the type of upbringing and household where, everything was kind of decided for you. And then even in your schooling, maybe you had that type of environment. Maybe you get to your first job and you're very, very junior in the job. And again, you don't make many decisions. You get out into the bigger workforce as you start to move up levels, and in your own life as you start becoming an adult. And it's a very foreign concept to you. You don't have the sort of exercising muscles of decision making.
Right.
So, and it's not typical,
Yeah. Well, I think we all know people who are indecisive. We can probably pop into our mind right now things like that. But today we want to kind of talk about, how can we, decide to decide, but also have a more productive life, live a better life because we're able to make decisions. Do you got some guidance and some tips on that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the first things to do when you are feeling indecisive, and this could be a very big decision that you have to make or a very small one. And we see this with organizing and productivity all the time. You do have to make a lot of decisions, for example, about your calendar, about your schedule. What will I say yes to? What will I say no to? How will I RSVP? What will I answer in terms of this email? So it does come up all the time in organizing and productivity. But the first thing to do is to ask yourself, is there any fear around me making this decision? So you want to find the fear. The fear could be, if I say yes, this could happen. If I say no, this could happen. And sometimes both ends of the decision can have a little fear, which is why somebody might be sitting in indecisiveness. I think oftentimes we think the fear is that we're going to make the wrong decision, but sometimes it's even deeper than that if you make a decision one way or the other, it might not be in alignment with your goals and priorities. So I think finding the fear, if there is any within that decision, will help you at least honor it and say, oh, this is what I'm worried about. Right. And if you don't do that, if you don't go into the why or what's the fear around this decision, then again, you just put it off and you just delay that decision. And you and I know that a lot of delayed decisions piled up on top of each other can actually become physical and mental clutter.
Right.
So every single time we say, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go to that event, I'm not going to RSVP. I don't know if I should put that on my calendar for today or for tomorrow. I don't know if I should answer this email. And even physically, piling up paper because you have so many maybes in your life. So I think there's a huge connection between indecisiveness and disorganization.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that fear and maybe even have an example of how you overcome it. Let's say you recognize it. Yeah, I don't want to make the wrong decision. I'm fearful of that. How do you coach people into overcoming that?
So there are a few tips that you can use. One is that you can actually make a pie chart. You could physically draw it out on a piece of paper, or you can do it in your mind. And you can ask yourself, okay, if there's some fear around this, how much of this pie is fear? And because oftentimes people think the fear is overwhelming. It's not something they're used to feeling. But then when we draw it out, we map it out, I'll say, how much of you is excited about maybe pursuing this opportunity or saying yes to this event? And how much of you is really fearful of it? And if the fear is much smaller than they think, 15%, 20%, then we want to focus on the positive side, the good things that could come from making this decision one way or the other. Yeah. So it sounds silly, but the pie chart exercise is a very great visual reminder. And also for people, that would be a right brain focus. For people that are left brain focused, they want the numbers. So if they start to realize that their fear is less than 50%, it's easier to overcome it.
Right.
I think another tip around that is you could journal. You could speak to a trusted advisor, which we could talk about in a few minutes. What you don't want to do is go into analysis paralysis because you're so fearful that it stops you in your tracks and you never make the decision. Right. So I'm a big fan of research. Coming from my legal background, I love to do my due diligence, but I sometimes think we need to put a limit or a cap on it.
Yeah, so, it seems also too that maybe someone could look at the pros and cons of a decision, and maybe that breaks it down into smaller chunks or something where they can get there. I guess the risk on this isn't that much.
Yeah, that's another great one. So there's the pie chart, and then there's just put a line down the middle and say like advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. And I've always been a big fan of doing that also. My husband and I have relocated many times over our marriage, and we are big fans of doing that. We actually map it out on a piece of paper. And you can go even deeper. Instead of just pros and cons, you could lay out aspects of the decision. So different aspects of the decision, and then you can look at it. Sometimes it's fun if you're making a decision that it impacts someone else, let's say a spouse, a business partner. You can both make your own pros and cons lists, and then you can switch. And it's really fascinating to look at the other person's.
Right. Well, what about just like getting started in general? I mean, sometimes it seems like people are just overwhelmed enough that they don't even really want to get started.
Yeah, I think they should start small. Okay. So if you're not really good at decision making, this is something you struggle with, then you can make a smaller decision and see what it feels like to exercise your decision making muscles. So I always tell people, start small, get some motivation around there, make a decision, realize that you can do this well, that you trusted your intuition and your gut, that you have sought some outside advice, but not so much external advice that you then get indecisive all over again, and make a decision. Sometimes you really just need to dive in. I think what I've noticed is people that are really high achievers, high executive leaders with great decision-making skills, they make quick and efficient decisions. It's unbelievable to watch them. And when you ask them, like, aren't you worried you might make the wrong decision? They say, not really. Because if I make the wrong decision, I learn from it. I learn from the wrong decision. I debrief what went wrong, and then I course correct. I learn from that, and now it's in my bag of tricks for next time. So instead of stressing and obsessing over, oh my God, I might make a mistake, they allow themselves to make mistakes, and then they course correct, tweak, and get back on a path without the mistake, and they learn from it. And I think that's a really interesting lesson for all of us, because unless it's a life or death decision, which it almost never is, or something really earth-shattering, if you do make a mistake, you will learn from it. You will move on. And so that's the biggest fear I think people have around decisions is, what if I make the wrong decision? And it's sort of like, is there really a wrong decision? Because if you make the right one and you're happy with it, you'll never regret or mourn the other side of that decision because you're happy with it.
Right.
And if you make the wrong decision, can you change it? Can you course correct? An extreme example is relocation. I mean, if we had moved somewhere and we were unhappy, could we have moved again? Yes. I mean, would it have been a total pain? Absolutely. But again, is it life or death? Not really. And so I think that's an interesting concept to think about is, how big are the mistakes really going to be from these decisions? And usually they're not as big as you think.
Right. A friend of mine is a golf professional, and he said, the difference between a pro golfer and an amateur is that when a pro golfer makes a bad shot, which in their vernacular is they've made the wrong decision, They can quickly correct course, and they don't sit there and lament about the bad decision they make. They just look forward and not backwards. So, there's a lot of mental in this, and I want to get more into that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about this mental game of deciding to decide. We're with Lisa Montanaro, lisamontanaro.com, and we'll be right back. Get organized in color at myorganized.life. myorganized.life. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about deciding to decide and making decisions, and not getting overwhelmed by it. And but before the break, we talked about fear is one of those things that keeps us from making decisions. And we're with Lisa Montanaro, lisamontanaro.com. So Lisa, the mind plays a lot in this game. You'd think that decisions are like you said, for fact-based people, it's this, or this, but it's more complicated than that. So let's talk a little bit more about how your mind will either trick you or play games with you to keep you from making decisions, because ultimately we want to make great decisions so we have a great life. So what else kind of plays into the game here?
Well, you've heard the phrase before, we all have trust your gut. Or, we all have an intuition.
Yes.
And so I think that this is sort of a mind-heart issue, because if you have done what I'm going to call the very left brain side of the decision, sort of analyzing the facts, as you mentioned, very fact-based, looking at the analytical side, but you still can't make a decision, that usually means that you have to go deeper into the feeling side of the decision, because you have all the facts you need, assuming that you've gone out there and you've gotten all the facts. And there's this cool concept, it's called, experts call it automated expertise. And that's when you trust your gut in past experiences, and it's proven to you that you can make the right call. So automated expertise means that in areas where you've had, a positive track record in the past, that those are the areas that you're most likely to succeed. So if you've kind of always made great decisions when it comes to business, then the idea is trust your automated expertise response, and know that you're probably not going to steer yourself in the wrong direction, and you're not all of a sudden going to have this type of decision that's a total aberration. If you do feel like making a decision that's a total aberration, another interesting thing that experts say is pay attention to that. So if you, John, have always made decisions along this type of path, and all of a sudden you feel your heart or your mind pulling you towards making a decision in this one instance that feels totally different, a lot of people will disregard that, be like, God, what's wrong with me? Why am I thinking of doing something so different? A lot of experts will say that's actually the one decision you should pay attention to. Because it means that you're seeking change or transformation, or that you want to try something new. Doesn't mean you should actually do it, but you should really pay attention to it.
Right.
So I think that was an interesting one also. So the automated expertise is that, you've done a good job in the past, and so you should sort of trust yourself. But when you feel yourself going in a totally different direction, do a gut check, and maybe ask some trusted friends and advisors, like, wow, this is a very different decision for me. And they may say, God, it really is. But that's also something to pay attention to, because maybe craving that type of change.
I don't know if we're jumping, I'm jumping to a different point or not, and correct me if we are, but I think also along with that is like visualization. I think about, if you've, done something, let's say you've made a 10-foot high jump. I don't even know if that's a good one or not. And then before you make the decision, should I, do this or not, you can play back that tape in your mind. I think Michael Phelps, the swimmer, used to do that. He would always visualize, getting to the finish line and winning. And so I don't know if that ties in. Do you think that ties in a little with this?
Oh, absolutely. I have some clients that I have them vision board this out. So they will make a vision board. I have clients that definitely do visualization exercises, or will write it out in a journal. Because I'm a writer, I tend to see things when I write them. So I actually might write a story or a scene about something. But I do have a lot of clients. I have a client that's in the military, and he told me there's no way I could have ever jumped out of my first plane. without having seen myself done it successfully in my mind over and over before I actually did it.
Right.
And so I do think that, and you bring up a great point about athletics. You do need to see yourself, running the marathon, see yourself, hitting the ball. So I think visualization does play a part into it. And let's bring that back to a decision, for example.
Yeah.
Let's say you have to have a difficult conversation with your staff, or that you're going to be explaining your decision to them, and you're nervous about that, which actually could just be a sign that you care. So visualizing yourself going to your team and talking to them about this decision and laying out for them why you made this decision in the particular way that you did, and visualizing that going well and anticipating the types of questions they may ask you, that will mean that you're going to be probably much more likely to be successful when you do make that decision and have that conversation.
It's interesting. Earlier in my career, and I had to manage some people, and I had a boss, and the cuts came, and I had to let somebody go who was a friend of mine, which was even more difficult. And he said, you know what, you just have to kind of, so you appreciate this as someone who does stage work as well, but he had just like a little 3-line script, and I put it on a Post-it note, and he said, just say these 3 things, and then don't say anything, and and then you've kind of made the decision, and then the fallout will come after that. And it worked really well. It was kind of like very tense, but just said the lines, and I practiced them, of course, so that's back to that, believing it, and then it worked out. So anyway, I don't know why I went on that trail, but I think it is, again, the mind, if it believes that it can do something, it will do it, right? And so same with decisions. If we believe that we're at least making a decision, maybe it's not the right one like we talked before, but at least you're making one, and you have the confidence that, well, even if I made the wrong decision, I know how to correct my course, right?
There's also a sense of relief. So you see a lot of people that they get stuck in the indecisiveness mode, and it actually can make them almost feel sick because they can't make this decision and they're fretting over it. And there's such a sense of relief when people finally make a decision that they don't look back as much as they think they do. People think they will look back on their decision and psychoanalyze it to death after they've made it, because they're agonizing over it during the indecisiveness mode, But actually, studies have shown that once people make the decision, they're so relieved just to have made one, regardless of which one it was, that they move on, which is really fascinating. So it's that leading up to mode when we're indecisive that actually causes us the most angst. And so I find that really fascinating, because I think when we're in that stage, it's very difficult to picture being on the other side. And when we picture being on the other side, we think we're going to regret and psychoanalyze all the aspects of the decision. And most of the time, we just move on.
Right.
Again, unless we've made a really wrong decision. And then we say, okay, this didn't work out the way I wanted to. What do I learn from this? What's my takeaway? How do I not make this decision again next time? Where did I go wrong? And so it just becomes a wonderful learning experience. And if you're open to growing, because I don't think I really thought about this until I started this business 16 years ago. And it's fascinating, because when people used to ask me as a lawyer, what are some things that you don't like about being a lawyer? I would say to them, making so many decisions, because you can get decision fatigue from making so many decisions. And we see this with a lot of people. And so when I started this business, I don't think I thought of this business as a business that needed to make decisions. And that's kind of funny when you think about it, since I am my own boss, I actually make all the decisions.
Yes.
But I think because it was my business and I knew who I was and what I wanted, it made it easier to make decisions because it wasn't impacting as many people.
Right.
So I think it's an interesting concept, this concept of decision fatigue. Some people that are listening may say to themselves, I'm making decisions constantly all day long. And if you do suffer from a little decision fatigue, then that's a great topic for another day, which is start delegating and start teaching others how to make decisions. And then you don't have to make them all yourself. And people in your life, your team members, your coworkers, your clients, your colleagues, and even your family members and friends probably love to be invested in some of the things you're doing and maybe make some of the decisions for you or with you.
Right.
So that's the other side of the coin, which is making too many decisions.
Right. Well, I have one more concept I want to talk about, then we need to wrap it up. And I don't know if this is a legal term or not, but you probably heard the term trial balloon. And so, and I think they do this in politics. They'll float out a name that they were nominating somebody for, or, we'll run a potential decision by someone. How does that play into decision making?
That's a good point. Almost like seeding. Is that what you're talking about? Like almost like seeding something?
Yeah. Or but I'm just thinking about, testing, like externally, getting kind of out of your, you're kind of seeding, you're kind of giving some of the idea to somebody else and then just getting some feedback before you actually make the decision.
Yeah. I think there are a few aspects to that. Let me go back to that in 1 second, but what you're making me think of is this idea of, it's called like a shadow decision, and that might be similar to what you're talking about. It's sort of like trying it on for size. You shadow the decision in a certain way, and what you're talking about is more like, could I try it on with someone else? Could I say like, hey, what if I told you I was going to go back to school and get a master's degree? Would you think I'm crazy? And the person might be like, no, So you're sort of mentioning it to some select people and trying it on. And you could also be trying it on yourself to see what it feels like. Maybe you go walk around the campus that you're thinking of applying to. And so that's sort of seeding your decision or shadowing your decision, but you can also do your actual decision in smaller ways. And so I've recommended this to clients a lot. And an example is a client that's thinking of going back to school to get a master's, for example, or a PhD, which is quite a big undertaking. And I've said, why don't you start by just taking an online class? Just take an online class within that area, or just audit one class on campus and see what that feels like and see how you feel in that environment and walking around. And so it's almost like you're putting it on, but instead of putting the entire coat on, like you're just not zippering it yet. So you're kind of seeing what that feels like. But I love your concept of floating the decision. So you could do that. You could throw it out there. Again, going back to a team environment, you could say to your team, hey, I'm thinking of changing up the way we do X, just to see how they react. And that's a way of testing your decision before you actually make it, and also seeing if you can get some buy-in.
Right.
You could do this with your spouse also. Hey, what do you think about selling the house someday? And your spouse like, what? or they're like, yeah, what do you have in mind? So I do think that sort of trying on those decisions just in a conversational way with yourself and with others can be really, really useful.
Yeah, it can move you forward. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to give you the opportunity to tell people how they can get a hold of you, but I know you got so much going on, so tell us what you're currently doing and how people can get a hold of you.
Sure, absolutely. So probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is at lisamontanero.com, which is my website, sort of the hub, and I'm very active on social media, so Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, probably all of those, to be honest. And I am actively booking speaking engagements and taking on coaching clients for 2019. So if any listeners are interested in reaching out, you can always email me or give me a phone call or connect through social media.
That's awesome. Well, Lisa, as usual, this is a great action-packed show, lots of good information, and I'm sure we'll have you back again.
Thanks so much, John. It's always a pleasure.
There we go, folks. Okay, now you've made the decision to decide, so get on it. Take the next step and go forward, and we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized.